We can debate whether or not the king is back, but that was impressive. I mean, like, how would that go? It would go quickly, really quickly. Not quite Jose Aldo quickly, but not much longer than that. 40 seconds of extreme violence, and then it was over. If you saw the fight or you've seen a replay of the fight, the only thing that would have made it even better or more impressive than that, Conor ran across the cage looking to land that giant left. Came out firing immediately. If that thing had connected and landed, that would have been the most spectacular thing ever. And he tried. But it didn't go, it missed. But it didn't go much longer than that. So Conor goes into the cage with a plan, and that plan was to leave that cage as quickly as possible after causing as much damage as possible and give everybody something to talk about. He missed with that huge left to start, but then he clinched with Cowboy Cerrone, and he broke out a new weapon, his shoulder, and he used it and appeared to break the Cowboy's nose. If you were surprised by that, you were not alone. So was Cowboy. Cowboy said, quote, 100%, it surprised me. I've never seen anything like that, end quote. Neither had I. And then Conor smashed him with a left kick, and moments later it was over. So much for cage rust. Conor knocked off all the rust in seconds and nearly knocked Cowboy's head off his shoulders a few seconds later. And for all the questions about how Conor would show up, his performance answered some, but it did raise a couple as well. Like, how do you explain a guy coming back from that much time off and coming back with a new weapon? That's pretty impressive. That might not have been his best fight ever. I'm not saying that. Notice I'm not coming in here and hyping this guy and saying the king is back, the king is back. That was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. It was really impressive. And he looked good. He looked really good. But I'm not going to say that was his finest moment or his best fight. Because nobody's going to confuse Cowboy at this point in his career with Habib or Masvidal or the other elites. He's tough, and he's a savvy vet, although there were a lot of questions coming in about how Cowboy would do on the big stage because he never fares well on the big stage and then didn't again. But this guy's solid now. Very tough and a very good fighter, and Conor just went right through him, took him apart, both with his skills and with his cage savvy and with his strategy. So again, I'm not going to be all over myself saying that was the best he's ever looked. That was another legendary Conor moment. But it certainly was a Conor moment. And he put everybody on notice, which includes any fighter that wants any part of him, because everybody does, because he gets everybody paid. He also went on about anybody, and anybody who has a, quote, made up belt. Quote, they can give fighters made up belts, but they can't give fighters knockouts across 3 weight divisions. End of quote. Conor's done that now. What do you think about Conor at 170? Do you buy that? Can the guy, it's one thing to win at 170, but it's another to beat the elite and the best at 170. I still have that question. But then again, Conor has his own questions. Something for those analysts who questioned his skill set. Man, he's good. Even when he's not saying anything, he's still good. So what happened tonight? I smacked him with me shoulder, and I smacked him with me foot. And how do you explain a guy looking that good after everything he's done to himself over the last few years? Part of it is about the booze. I love this. He admitted part of his problem was the booze. Quote, I love that whiskey, but you've got to respect it. You've got to respect that liquid, because if you don't, it will come and get you. End quote. You know, I've gone on and on about Conor McGregor and how he's like the greatest showman I think I've ever seen in sports. The greatest smack runner I've ever seen in sports. And I want to temper that by saying he has said some pretty abhorrent things. Like, I can't get with everything he says. Far from it. When he's good and he's just talking junk for junk's sake, that's fine. But when he goes racist and talks about some of this other nonsense, that's not fine at all. But when he's clean, he's good. And when he owns things, he's good. Quote, you've got to respect that liquid, because if you don't, it will come and get you. He's talking about the sauce, the whiskey. So the stories about him hitting the sauce hard before the Khabib fight, that's all true, right? How is it possible that he was able to step into the cage with his most dangerous opponent and he was drinking all week? This is what he's saying. That to me still doesn't even make sense. I mean, it's one thing for you to hit the sauce too hard before a really important event in your life. It's another thing to hit the sauce if that event includes another guy trying to break your face. That to me is unfathomable. But that's exactly what he says he did. See what I mean? When the guy's just being Conor and he's being straight, he's so interesting. He's so fascinating. He admitted it. He said, I'm a coach's worst nightmare. What do you do when you break the game before you're 30 and you've achieved everything? Dana White and I talked about this literally for months. What do you do when you have $100 million? What do you do when you had nothing and then suddenly you have everything? Where is the incentive to continue to work? Conor admitted it. I'd done these amazing things and I stopped putting in the work. Then he realized it. Then he came back and he looked great. So the question becomes, who does he fight next? If in fact the king is back and he's holding the hammer once again, who does he fight next? Is it Khabib or is it somebody else? I don't know. I mean, is it Nate Diaz? Dana White was saying it's Khabib. You can make an argument that Masvidal, who is our guest on the podcast this week, Jorge Masvidal. Man, I love Masvidal. This guy, the resurrection, game bread. I mean, I want to say that he's too big for Conor. But then again, we are talking about the two baddest dudes in the sport. And I would say, no offense, Nate. I think Nate is one of the baddest mothers anywhere. But Masvidal got him. But if you're Conor, what do you do next? If you're Dana White, who do you make him fight? Well, actually, you can't make Conor do anything, right? We know this. But what's next? I'm not sure. Because I'm not sure that anybody expected a performance like that. Coming back, dominating, finishing it as quickly as he did, and breaking out the shoulder strikes. What happened Saturday night in the cage does not erase everything that's happened outside of the cage. But for the first time in a long time, what we have are good Conor headlines, the right headlines. Again, I'm not saying that that means he's back as a fighter. I'm not saying that that means that was his best fight or most impressive performance. It was neither of those things. But when you consider the layoff, when you consider how long it's been since he last won, when you consider the obstacles that he put in his own path, man, that was impressive as hell. If that's not the full Conor McGregor in the cage, it's a damn good reminder. It doesn't mean that he can beat the other guys I mentioned. It doesn't mean he's back. And while no fighter is bigger than this sport is a hell of a lot better when McGregor is not running dollies through buses, punching old men in bars, not respecting the liquid, and getting accused of other heinous stuff. You know, he may have a point. Point being, the king might be back. Now we have to wait and see what he does next, who he fights next.